Good evening, campers. It is said that people are born crying into this world because of all the suffering. Brazilians, however, are different. Brazilians are born crying into this world because one day in school they're going to have to read Macunaíma. I'm fully aware that after my review of Dom Casmurro, myself and the Brazilians, we have a bit of a fetid history. A complicated one at best. It is a testament to have this accolade, but Brazilians are the most passionate about their own literature than anyone else I have uncovered on the internet. Brazilians go hard. But when I saw that the publisher Fitzcarraldo were making Macunaíma their inaugural choice for their classic series, I thought, why not? In for a penny, in for a pound. Macunaíma was first published by Mário de Andrade in 1928 and has been newly translated by Katrina Dodson in 2023. This is the first translation of Macunaíma into English. However, the last one was by E.A. Goodman in 1984. So nearing the centennial of Macunaíma's publication, this body of work is going to be open to a new audience. Anglophone readers are going to grapple with one of the seminal modernist Brazilian novels ever published that is swooning in a culture, in a folklore, in a mythology, and endeavour to try to go through the swathes of flora and fauna unbeknownst to them, which is all exciting stuff. But before we get into the novel, I think it's worthwhile talking about Andrade and his legacy within the Brazilian literary scene. I will give a reason why over 6 delirious days Andrade decided to write Macunaíma, although he did edit and revise the original manuscript over a year. So technically it was written in under a week. Technically. Andrade wrote 2 influential bodies of work, one being Macunaíma, the second one being Hallucinated City, Policia Desvariada, which was, if not the first influential collection of Brazilian poetry. With these 2 texts, it's undoubtedly to say that Andrade is one of the most influential writers in Brazilian history. In fact, he was the driving force of the Week of Modern Art in 1922, which was hosted in Sao Paulo. This event reshaped and informed the Brazilian visual arts and literary movement within Brazil, arguably defined the start of the Brazilian modernist movement. Pioneering, radical and provoking, to the point that Andrade, along with other artists, were booed, condemned and scathed. If you think of modernism on the global scale, this was quite common. Think of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. However, Andrade's focus wasn't to cause an uproar, it was to define and to find a purely Brazilian mode of literature. Influenced by the Cannibal Manifesto, which wasn't about eating people, it was about digesting and regurgitating Anglo, Luso, Americo and European elements of literature in order to discover what a Brazilian form would look like. 6 years after the Week of Modern Art and 6 delirious days, we have Macunaíma, a novel that sought to attempt, and from my very limited knowledge of Brazil, I think succeeds in creating a pan-Brazilian experience. As such, Macunaíma navigates various languages, dialects, accents, forms of colloquialisms that have been imported and explored within Brazilians' culture, folklore, myths, legends across the many people of Brazil, indigenous and otherwise, alongside African, Portuguese and indigenous influences that had shaped Andrade's Brazil. In hearing this, some people might question how the English translation tries to encapture that. So know that Dodson's translation uses many different stylistic forms, moving between various modes of speaking such as Victorian language, Pig Latin, colloquialisms, slang as an example to encapsulate this cannibalistic style of Andrade's. We've mentioned cannibalism twice now, so let's make it thrice. The story of Macunaíma is basically about our titular character, Macunaíma, who is searching for a lost amulet that his late lover Ki has given him, and is subsequently being chased all across Brazil by a cannibalistic giant Piaíma. So who is Macunaíma anyway? Well, he's part of the fictional indigenous tribe, the Tapanhumas. For an average Joe blogs, he is not. He can teleport an entire village over mountains instantly. He can shapeshift, he can change sex, he can change gender, he can change race. He also becomes an adult instantaneously just to give his brother's wife a poking hug. There's a lot of absurdities and bizarrities, but most importantly, hilarities that are going to keep you asking why? Why does the eyeball-looking fruit grow out of Macunaíma's dead son? Why do all the women seem to turn into celestial bodies? Why does they, the sun, fart flames? Why is Macunaíma now a French lady seducing the giant that wants to kill him? Why did all the birds now turn to stone? Why was Dom Pedro II nicknamed Pape Grande? Does he like it when you call him Big Papa? But Macunaíma, as the subtitle tells us, is a hero with no character. So let's talk about that. Evidently we see it in Macunaíma's catchphrase, pretty much summarises it up. And this catchphrase will be very similar to Vonnegut's "So It Goes." Ay, que preguiça. Just so lazy. It's an indictment to not be active in any way. He has no character because simply he has no agency. I would further this by saying Macunaíma's passivity is almost in due part to Andrade focusing, steeping it within the folkloric and the mythic. Macunaíma is bound not to the laws of Brazil, but to the law of Brazil. Macunaíma need not be active because the stories are dictating what is to occur. I will say, in reading a story about indigenous tribes in a forest with oodles of plants and animals and references that I truly will never be able to understand and comprehend, I expected the majority of this to be forest bound, but from chapter 5 onwards, we then have a besiegement of automotives. We have Englishmen who are selling bullets and pistols that are growing from trees. It's at that moment you realise that Andrade is really pushing the idea of what form can do, of what the novel is meant to achieve, what it's meant to represent to its readers, almost to the utmost. I would say that it pushes it to breaking point, but everything just languishes around the titular. Bear in mind, this is the first time I've read Macunaíma from front to back, but this is a rich text. In fact, Macunaíma is only half the length of what you see. The rest of it is endnotes, it's references, it's everything that will give you an understanding to what Andrade was doing. You could argue that Andrade is bombarding the reader, but really I think the author has lovingly packaged Brazilian law in a text. And I think that you should read this. A really insightful, and I understand why this is being studied by Brazilians. I will give this an 8 out of 10. And I think it's only fair to end this video like Andrade ends Macunaíma. And that's all.